Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This past weekend, I spent a little time looking at the snowpack across the United States, and one of these great national snow analysis maps from last year really shows us the difference between what we saw at this point in 2021 versus what we've now got in 2022. The map you've been looking at here is for 2021, and we're not going to really pay too much attention to the east in this case, but I want to look at the western part of the United States. When I compare this now to what we've got through January 10th, 2022, you can see a pretty substantial difference. Now again, we're looking at snow water equivalent, which means if you melted all this snow down, how much liquid equivalent do you get out of it? And you can see we're at the top end of this, this color bar here. Again, 2021 versus 2022. And just thinking about that, parts of the Sierra Nevada mountains have already surpassed the last 2 years in terms of total snowfall in certain places, and we still have the whole rest of this kind of winter and early spring to go through to pick up more precipitation. Now in the near term, we're going to be going over toward a drier pattern, and the temperature is going to start to rebound here, but this early season snowpack is just going to serve as an excellent start to what will be hopefully a good spring and summer melt that'll fill some of those reservoirs. Okay, let's come back to what we're dealing with right now. This is a satellite animation. I'm kind of going backwards in time here. Let's get it back to this morning. There we go. This is a satellite animation from today, and it's kind of neat. If I pause at midday, we can see the Midwestern snowpack here, but you can also see, lake effect snow really going here across the Great Lakes. A lot of the country saw clear skies today, and that's because this large front kind of came through and cleared things out. I was looking at that specifically just in the Northeast, and this is kind of neat to watch. If you just see the clouds coming here across the Great Lakes, across Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, we have what are called wind parallel bands. So you can see that the flow is coming across the lake like this, basically creating these streets of clouds, all right? But then when that same flow comes across Lake Erie, which is here, or Lake Ontario, which is there, you end up getting what's called a shore parallel band. So it's a single band of snow that oftentimes is much more intense than the wind parallel bands given the orientation of, for example, Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. So we saw today lake effect snow warnings on these particular spots on the Great Lakes, and that's an area that's been in deficit this year in overall snowfall. I'll show you that in a few moments. But what I also found fascinating was as you saw the flow, coming across like this, it was basically going over the mountains, which are oriented for the most part like that. Now they move around a little bit, but if that's the general orientation. So we ended up getting these standing waves on top of the cloud streets, and that gave you almost a checkerboard view of the clouds. You could tell how much cold air is exiting New England by the cloud streets that are here just offshore. And again, we're going to see some moderation of these temperatures this week, but just an amazing view here from satellite. Well, in the near term, this is what we're dealing with. Over the next 5 days, we're going to be seeing this ridge open up here across the west, in general troughing over the Hudson Bay into the east. And so there's going to be a lot of mild weather coming back into a region like the Canadian Prairie here that has been very cold since late November. So we're going to really kind of push some warmer air back into it while this particular pattern sets up. But I'm going to keep a close eye on the troughs that are here in the overall long wave pattern, because we're going to see with time these troughs kind of retrograding to the west with time, which means enjoy the warm up we've got right now in this part of the Canadian Prairie, because colder air is certainly on its way back to this region. In terms of precipitation, we're going to be watching some systems that come into British Columbia. One I'm going to be very interested in seeing what will happen at the end of this week. That's going to emerge as a kind of a set of shortwaves. There'll be one here over the Puget Sound and another one right here. They're going to work together to produce a low that comes out of the Canadian Prairie right in through this region, and it's going to have some snow in it. And that's going to bring some snow to some places that so far this season have seen very little. The other part of this is that much of the west is dry. We're going to see much of the south, mid-south getting here to the east coast showing up drier than average. And that's because these systems are going to eject off the east coast. And instead of running up the east coast, which they can this time of year, right now the models are trying to just push them out. See that? And I'll show you what's going on here in just a few moments, but I wanted to get you this snapshot of how things are shaping up to this point. Now from here, I'm going to take you to one of my favorite websites. It's at the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, and we're going to look at what we call their National Temperature and Precipitation Ranks. If you Google that, National Temperature and Precipitation Ranks, National Temperature and Precipitation Maps, you'll get to this site. Now we're only looking here at December, and I'm sure you may have seen today in some of the news headlines that The data were released today, and December is now the warmest December on record, 127 years in this data set. But when you break that down by region and then eventually by state, this is where I want to get you. You can see that, let's look at this one right here. When you look at just statewide average temperature ranks, we had a whole bunch of states in the Central Plains, the Southern Plains, getting over here into the Mid-South and the lower Mississippi River Valley that had their warmest Decembers on record. And all these ones you see with the 126 in it, that would be second place. So this was a very, very warm December. And I want to just talk to you and show you a couple of things about this. We've covered a little bit, but take a look at this. Another one of my favorite sites, Climate at a Glance. It's a great tool from NOAA. I went in and chose average temperature for the month of December, a 1-month average. I went back to 1895, and I specifically wanted to look at Texas. When you look here, this is quite amazing. Texas's temperature in December was right up here at an average of 59 degrees Fahrenheit. And just to put this to a point, down here at the bottom, we actually have the rankings. And let's do this, change it by rank. There we go. The next warmest was 1993, December 1993. And just look, 12.1 degrees above the average this year. Second place, 6.4, and look at that, 6.3 and on down the line. So this was a substantial outlier in terms of the historical temperature record here, going back to 1895 for Texas. And just so you see here, I put a blue trend line over the last 40 years on the data so you can kind of assess the changes overall, which is about 1 degree Fahrenheit per decade in Texas for the month of December. Now we look at this past December, and we know exactly why this was the case. The pattern was set up, as we've been discussing over the last few weeks, with a big ridge that sat over the Aleutian Islands. Therefore, troughs dug into the west, and there was this large ridge that was in place somewhere between the Mid-South and the New England coast, or excuse me, the Mid-Atlantic coast. At times when this ridge moved out over the open ocean, we opened the atmosphere up to those big severe weather outbreaks, which in December we added 3 more billion-dollar disasters. That would have been the December 10th tornado outbreak, the December 15th severe wind event, and then the December 30th fire in Colorado. But whenever that ridge moved back, it just brought with it warm and dry conditions. Now, take a good look at this map, because what's happened since then is this. This is the beginning of January. We've lost our large ridge feature that had been really firmly in place in this region. And our trough has seemed to kind of retrograde a bit back. Do you see that? This is where the new flow pattern has been. And it set us up with, a pretty active, run of it right through the midsection of the country. Now, just thinking about that, any pattern adjustment to this in the coming days is going to be substantial. And where you have deep troughing for the beginning of January, this is going to go away in a big way. And I want to talk to you about maybe some reasons as to why. First, we've been discussing a lot about this MJO being in phase 7. There were some hints, you saw this in Thursday's video, of it popping out into phase 8. And we had questions, is it going to move forward over to phase 1 or collapse back into null space into this area? Some of the latest forecast data, suggests something like that. It's in phase 7 now. It's going to try to get into phase 8, and if the model's got this right, it's going to maybe curl back around and do the same thing again. In other words, as this La Niña is kind of slowly letting go, the MJO wants to just stay somewhere over here in the West Pacific. Now, we've been studying this for a long time, and we know that if it is January and the MJO is in phase 7, we need to be on the lookout for ridging in this area. Troughs here, and possibly some North Atlantic blocking. See that? That's phase 7 of the MJO. What about phase 8 in January? Same thing. See that trough there, or that ridge, the trough downstream, and possibly some North Atlantic blocking. You see, that's the number one pattern that if you look at the tropical teleconnections, we have to be on the lookout for, especially this right here, this ridge. Okay, given that, I want to show you what the latest GFS ensemble is showing, and this is very similar to the European ensemble, which I'll show you again in a few moments. As I play this forward, can you see it? We just keep building ridges over the west. I just played all the way through to Friday. Here's this little wave that's going to come through here, but most of the waves get pushed into British Columbia, and then they run over the top and they kind of dive. So this is through Friday. What about into the weekend? Well, we see the same thing, right? Into early next week. There's a ridge in place here, trough downstream, and some North Atlantic blocking. This is just consistent with overall what we're seeing right now in the behavior of the MJO. So I just keep playing this out past day 10, and I do see another thing. this pattern is broken down by the time we get to day 10, 11, 12 into just 1, 2, 3 large ridge events and then 1, 2, 3 trough events. Now, the fewer the waves, 1, 2, 3, this is really a 3-wave pattern, the more the pattern likes to retrograde or move west. That's all due to the advection of what we call planetary vorticity. And that's just going to shift this pattern or leave it in place or move it west rather than allowing it to progress with a bunch of short waves to the east. Now, what we ask is, given the position of our La Niña, which this is the latest update on our La Niña, would we expect that to occur? And what role does this cold water right here have? So as an update for what's going on with La Niña, I want to show you this great image from Tropical Tidbits. It's looking at the 7-day change in ocean temperatures. And what we've started to see is a few more pockets here of some warmer water showing up, which means that the trade winds are a bit chaotic right now. They're not necessarily in one strong uniform phase, moving one direction or the other. But we still have a La Niña, and looking historically, we know this. La Niñas tend to favor a variable ridge somewhere here. And what that ridge tends to do is it tends to come into a pattern that looks like this. Now that tends to set up a more active Intermountain West, tends to be a bit drier for California, mild for the south, but a very active mid-south to mid-Atlantic storm track. Now what I think is going to happen here is that this trough in the near term is going to try to keep pushing its way back to the west with time. But I certainly see a very active storm track in through this part of the country, and so does the long-range European model. This is the new update from today on Monday. And what you're looking at is precipitation anomalies from January 21st to February 21st. And now again, we can see what's happening. In fact, I'd like to give you a little different view. There we go. This is now kind of a North American view, same time period. You see, there's some sense of a ridge here. That's why we got these dry conditions in place. And does that flow come around like this, a little bit further to the west than suggested, and then really eject into this area and pull up into the East Coast? That is a possibility of a more favored storm track looking forward throughout the rest of January and into the month of February. I think we're going to see that quite a bit. So what about temperatures? Well, if we're going to put more troughs in place, just generally speaking from here to the East Coast, this area, it would make sense that the models are going to be, more aggressive on keeping that colder air in place. And this is kind of a look we've seen quite a bit as of late. If there's going to be a place that's going to be mild, I think it'll be pretty far to the south, over Texas and along the Gulf Coast. But that also may serve as a good reference as to where this boundary is going to be, right in through there on which storm systems are going to live, because that'll be where the jet stream is. So I'm looking at all of this, thinking much of the cooler weather here is a feedback in the model due to the snowpack. But I do expect the pattern to kind of favor doing something like that throughout the rest of January and early February. All right, that's your latest update from the European model, the weeklies, looking out at that 1-month time period, January 21st to February 21st. All right, in the near term, this is what we've got. This is a forecast from today, the 12Z European model. Now you can see through the next week, no additional snow really getting added here in a big way to parts of the west. Systems going to British Columbia. They then run over the ridge, and we're going to watch this system late this week come out of Saskatchewan right down here through the Midwest. And at this point, it's expected to get over to North Carolina and then come out into the Atlantic. Now, this is the European. This is what the GFS shows. That's total snow from the GFS. And there's decent agreement with this, right? I mean, that's not too far off in between these two models. But there's a reason why we're so interested in this, or at least I am. I live here in Champaign. We've not had any snow. I mean, we have yet to measure our first inch of snow, and we're pretty far behind. Take a look at this. Through January 10th, what's the departure from normal? Well, there's this area right in through here where that snow could come through that hasn't seen much this year. And I know most of New England is hurting here in terms of snowpack, but if we could get these systems to curl up the coast, that could really change what's going on here. Now, right now, we're adding snow to these two lake effect areas that are in deficit, but it's not going to make up the longer-term deficits there. And of course, the West, we talked about at the beginning, being much above average. I like to show you this another way, too. We did this on Thursday as well. What you've got here is percent of normal snow fall through January 10th. Just another perspective on it. So we're seeing about bringing some snow into this area. Now, the wave that's going to produce this is still a couple of days away from even coming on shore. So when we look at the ensembles, this is the probability of getting at least 3 inches of snow between now and next Monday. And we can see that that area in through there has got this, 30 to 60% chance. The greatest chance is right in through here as we look forward. And then again, as it comes over the Appalachian Mountains and gets out over open ocean, we're going to watch this. So that's what we've kind of got here in terms of our pattern in the near term. Now that wave is this guy right here. That's it. That's the short wave I'm talking about. And the flow is just generally going to do something like this, which means it's going to have to follow that flow and get pulled into the main branch of the jet stream and then come down here just like this deeper trough suggests. On Thursday, I thought this was going to be more of a factor. Remember when we talked about that cutoff low here? We thought that that was going to get pulled into the flow sooner, but it's not. It's going to probably just stay out there. So we need to get in and talk a bit about it. Now, I've been looking at this very carefully by looking at the upper level wind pattern. And I'm just going to take you right to that system we're talking about. It's right here because I think there's some cool meteorology in this. Okay, this is all it is. That little wave there and this one right in through here. Now you watch this with me. This is a map of vorticity. Remember, when we look at vorticity, it's always where the vorticity is going that we're going to get rising motion. So there is a weak little wave moving through the Midwest on Thursday. That could bring in some light snow to this area, but watch. After we move this forward Thursday night, this is the wave that comes out right in through here. Now, as that wave does that, what will be most important is what happens with the second one. This one started off here and moved south, while the second one started here and moved there. Now, as we play this forward, that wave then deepens and cuts right across Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri. And out ahead of it, that's where we're going to get the rising motion in this area. And at the same time, that other wave is now here. See the importance of getting these two to split? Now, for the Carolinas, on Saturday, getting into Sunday, this wave opens back up, and that's what is problematic. Well, not problematic. It's actually a good thing because it opens up. It's going to follow more of a zonal flow out to open ocean. If this trough you see right here is misplaced in the models and is instead back closer toward the Hudson Bay, that'll grab that system that's coming through the Carolinas and pull it right up the East Coast. So you see a lot of things right now are still several days away. I mean, we're talking about a trough that's out here that's going to do all of that. But I want to show you what the latest model runs are. So let's do it. Multi-model analysis, GFS, European. We got everything kind of working again, which is good. But let's get you started off here. Let's go right to Tuesday morning. High pressure in place over Ohio. And as we let this go forward, that high pressure is going to slide off to the east while a little shortwave cuts right into here. It's in both models. But we're going to get a warm-up in the mid-section of the country this week as a result of that high pressure sliding off to the east, bringing in the warmth here as the ridge opens. Now, Wednesday, we're watching right here in both models. Look at this, coming into the Puget Sound, into British Columbia. So by Wednesday, getting into Thursday, here's our two waves. GFS has them here and here. European has them here and here. The GFS has them there and there. Now, there's a little bit different scenario here, but as we get in toward, again, this would be looking out there at Friday midday, getting into Friday evening, now getting into Saturday. You can see that the models have a little different flavor on the position and strength of that snow. See it? GFS is here, and the European is there. And by the way, don't forget, I'm going to go back here. We do have, will you watch this real quick here? That's the lead wave on Thursday. So this is now Thursday 6 a.m., getting to Thursday around noon. So we have this lead wave that's coming through here, bringing in some rain and some snow, possibly some locally heavy convective amounts I think we could get out of this. But let's now get to that next system. It then gets here by Saturday, early Saturday morning, pulls through Illinois, and then you watch on Saturday evening, it's over the mid-Atlantic, except in the GFS, where the GFS leaves it lingering back here. So the European wants to toss this out over open ocean quickly through Saturday night into Sunday morning. The GFS lets it hug the coast. And we ask ourselves why this is the case. Well, in this particular situation, European's got another low following it and a deeper low sitting right here, and this all just helps funnel stuff off. The GFS has got a little bit different timing on this. Deepens that low, but keeps it offshore while more scattered snow showers come in behind this in that deeper trough. This is really a fascinating pattern through the next week. So we come back to it again. Let's go here. That's the European model on snow. That's the GFS on snow out of these next couple systems. And again, they're pulling through regions that have been missing out on it. All right, what about total liquid equivalent, so total precip? Outside of that, this little wave that's coming in through here, there's not a whole lot of precipitation around the rest of the country. In fact, it's relatively dry. And even the total amount of liquid that's in that snow here is just barely getting up above, a half inch to an inch. So it's not as though this is going to be a really saturated system overall. But this is what happens by the time we get to week 2. Now, day 10, watch, through day 11, 12, 13. Did you see that? The waves don't move very much. What they did do is amplify. And this trough kind of backed itself up a bit. Now, if that occurs, we'll get convergent flow here, but an active time as we get out there into that third week of January in through this area. And the models are just now picking up on this. They're starting to erode away what had been a drier look here, and they've increased the precip. So I think we're going to see a very active storm track like this, and possibly like this, getting into that third week of January. That's what I'm predicting here. A lot of clipper systems in this area. Drier along the west coast as the ridge builds, but things are going to come together, push up against the mountains here in Montana, and eject out into this area. I think we're going to have to watch this very carefully in this region moving forward. Now watch what these temperatures do in response to all of this. Here is today's highs on Monday, but let's go ahead and get out there to Tuesday. I told you with that high pressure moving east, the midsection of the country warms up. The ridge forms and we go back into temperatures from Texas, maybe even into Nebraska that crack 60, but we're still up to 15 to 20 degrees above average, stretching all the way into the Canadian Prairie. So that's Wednesday's highs. Thursday might be the most kind of mild day in the midsection of the country. And then we go from Thursday into Friday, and then Saturday. That's when the system's rolling through. Got a little bit of cold air behind it. Now, what do these temperatures do after that? Well, the GFS and the European 12Z runs are pretty consistent. Now, watch this with me. Do you see where the cold air is here? That's that trough. The ridge is in place in the west. But what you're going to see is, if I go from day 5 through 10 in the time period, out to day 10 through 15. Now do you see the more cold air coming back into place here? And given that the Great Lakes are currently only about 7% covered in ice, I do expect, as this pattern develops into that deeper trough, a lot more lake effect snow. And that'll be important, just given the fact that we should really start to increase that lake effect snow amounts around the Great Lakes moving forward. Now, how cold is this? Well, some of these temperatures here are getting to be 15 to 20 degrees on average colder than the climatological normal. But I want to point something out. This is not due to a connection with the polar vortex. The polar vortex is currently sitting right here over the Arctic and is expected to kind of move toward Russia, toward Scandinavia, and stay strong. The more it looks like a donut, the tighter its grip on the colder air. We don't even see a major disruption happening in the polar vortex in the near term. You kind of see that the polar vortex strength is forecast to go there. There's average. A year ago, setting us up for that terrible February, the polar vortex had already split, went to Russia, and was on its way back to North America, basically between now and the beginning of February. So entirely different scenario than we saw a year ago. But I'll watch the behavior of that polar vortex very carefully. But as long as it looks like a donut like this, it's going to keep a pretty tight grip on the colder air. So what's coming here in this day 10 to 15 is just the tropospheric trough setting back up over this area and spreading that colder air across much of the eastern half of North America. So we'll keep watching this carefully and see how this pattern continues to evolve and see if the teleconnections remain the way they are. But with that, I'll wrap it up and just tell you I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.